Welcome back to the scientific writing class. Today's short lecture will be about paper deviations from IMRaD. You will remember the typical IMRaD structure, this symbol of an hourglass where you have all your sections very clearly organized as introduction, methods, results, and discussion. This is the typical IMRaD hourglass structure, and some journals ask you to deviate this structure, to deviate from this structure. Specifically, the method section doesn't follow the introduction, but it will be squeezed in here after the results. And I will give you an example of some of these differences in journals that do not allow for this structure, but a different structure. And here's an example of one of the papers that was published by a PhD student in our team. And you see here title, the authors, the abstract, and here you see the structure information. You see that we have introduction, but then you right away follow into the results and the discussion, and then comes the methods. So here we deviate from the typical IMRaD structure, but the journal asks for this. So first reports results and only later describe the analysis of experiments, and this is typically for Nature, also PNAS. The methods, of course, are still included and very detailed, and often there's a supplement that is including a lot of the methods. You can see here supplementary information comes at the end, and because of the limits that some of these journals have in terms of length and size, much information goes into the supplement. So the methods last paper, as I showed you before, an example for Nature, they report the results first and only later describe the analysis experiments. This is the example for Nature or PNAS. Although methods is placed at the end of the paper, plenty of information about the methods is included in the paper. As I said before, sometimes it's placed in the supplement, but you should still be able to completely be able to redo the experiment with the information that's given in the method and supplement section. Then the results also typically full of methods-rich sentences and provide just enough information about your methods to understand the response to the report. So you have to be able to replicate your results with the methods that you describe. Generally, these papers are very densely written. There's a lot of information in them. Another example where you potentially deviate from the typical IMRaD structure are the review papers. So a review paper answers a research question by drawing on many investigations. It surveys and evaluates the literature on a specific topic, and it's usually less detailed and technical than primary research paper. It's typically also intended for a broader audience. So for example, if you take data sets that are already published in the literature and you take them into a metadata and statistical analysis, you typically write a review paper about this and publish this secondary source of paper based on the primary sources. The structure can deviate from the IMRaD structure. Also, you would have to check the journal guidelines because, again, they are given by the journals. In this case, as an example, you would still have the introduction and the objectives. Then you have some sections with no standard organization, often like subsections of a discussion, but you might also use your IMRaD structure again, depending on what you're doing, and the conclusion. Again, for review papers, the journal guideline will tell you exactly if they have a requirement for a special structure. Here are some examples for further deviations from the IMRaD structure. So these are called notes, letters, viewpoints, and comments. In general, they are very short. For example, the comments here, they reproduce recently published primary research papers. So you read a paper and you see that it's not according to what you thought is scientifically correct or so. Then you publish a review. They often differ extreme from the IMRaD structure. So they have their own structure. They are not intended to be read independently from the original article and most similar to organizing a discussion section. So these are very strong deviations from the IMRaD structure. Why are they so interesting still for us? Because, of course, they digest the material of the paper in a way that it's that it's even further condensed, and they often address a much wider audience. Like in this case, for example, I've given you an example here. So the original paper was Greenland's ice will melt faster than any time in the past 12,000 years. And you see the original article was published in Nature by Brina et al. News. And then they condensed this material into, I think it was a comment or news point. And they also provided some podcasts about it. This is also very common new to have these science podcasts. So this is meant to be for a wider audience. In general, they don't use the IMRaD structure that we talked about, so there's no headings allowed. However, if you do write something like this, you might want to use the IMRaD outline for yourself to structure your article. Coming back to the original structure that we learned, this is the typical structure that we follow. There are some exemptions to the rule given by the journals, so there are good reasons for using the hourglass structure, and sometimes you are forced to deviate and do it as mildly as possible.